Hi, fourth graders. Okay, so this is a quick video to give you directions on how you will write your paragraph for your mid-unit assessment. So remember, this whole time we have been focusing on what? Yes, we've been focusing on what inspires Jack to write poetry. And so before this lesson, we have already decided if you are writing about sky inspiring Jack, or if you are writing about other famous poets inspiring Jack. So to be successful in writing this paragraph, you're going to need a couple things. One, you are going to need your workbook turned to page 48. Two, you are going to need your notes from class. So remember, on Friday, we wrote down all of our notes about the 4 different things we need in our paragraphs. And then 3, you are going to need a copy of Love That Dog. If you've already turned it in, that's okay, because there's a copy for you on Schoology, and there are copies of poems on Schoology. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so this is the first part that we need to have, right? So in Love That Dog by Sharon Creech, even though he doesn't understand poetry at first, the main character Jack is inspired to write poetry. That's number 1, introducing the book, author, and gist. Now we're going to write our focus statement. You are going to fill in this blank with either sky or other famous poets. So I'll write my focus statement here. All right, so notice how, here's my focus statement, it's number 2, but I started writing it right after the period from number 1. So here's my focus statement, and remember, in paragraphs, we make sure that our sentences just run together instead of skipping lines. So here's my focus statement. Jack was inspired by things that happen in his classroom, and you can see this in his poetry. So now it's time for me to give my 2 pieces of evidence. All right, so like I've said before, there are copies of Love That Dog and all of Jack's famous poems in our language arts course. So if you go to our week 12 folder, at the very top you'll see copy of Love That Dog. And when you click on it, a copy of the whole book pops up here. So for example, I'm going to tell you about what I like on November 6th. And when I click on those dates, it takes me right to that page. So for my piece of evidence, I'm going to paraphrase in my own words what happens here. So I said, for example, on November 6th, he writes a poem about how he likes his poems typed up on blue paper and hung up on the yellow bulletin board. Okay, so here for my second piece of evidence, I'm going to use a direct quote. And so I'm going to say, also, on April 4th, comma, Jack writes, comma, quotation mark, thank you for typing up my secret poem, period, quotation mark. So this is another piece of evidence that shows Jack was inspired by things that happen in his classroom. Another place that I could find evidence, I'm going to go back to our folder, is using this link, Famous Poems from Love That Dog. When I open this up, you'll see all the poems that Jack read, and then also all of his versions of those poems. Remember, these are a lot of poems about sky, and you can tell that these are inspired by famous poets. So how might you use this to get your evidence? So now I'm on to my last part, which is my conclusion statement written right here in green. And you can copy this exact statement for your paragraph if you'd like. That's why I had you copy it down. So now that I've finished copying this down here, this is my completed paragraph. All right, so it's a really good idea to write things down first before you type them. So I've written this down, and now it's time for me to go ahead and type it up on my computer. You are going to have both Monday and Tuesday to work on this, so don't worry too much about time. I'm going to type up our paragraph next. So I'm going to click on Monday, and here's where you're watching the video. I'm clicking type your paragraph. For you, it'll look like this. Here's the slide just one last time in case you need it. And you click Start New Attempt. So here are the directions. Throughout Units 1 and 2, you've been reading Love That Dog and thinking about what inspires Jack to write poetry. Now you're going to write an informative paragraph to answer the question, what inspires Jack to write poetry, and where can you see evidence of this in his poetry? Use details from the notes you color-coded in class to explain your thinking. All right, so well-written paragraph, remember we need to introduce the book and author and the gist. We need our focus statement. We need evidence, those are the details. The concluding sentence that restates the focus that you can copy from what we have. And finally, follows the rules of writing. So you're going to do your best with spelling, punctuation, which means periods and quotation marks, and grammar. So let's start typing this up. So and I'm going to underline the name of this book. So click here, Love This, That Dog. I'm gonna click here again by, remember, capital letters for people's names, by Sharon Creech. Now, do you see what's happening under here? These red dots? That's gonna happen to you too. And it's okay. This is a name, so I know this is spelled correctly. But for example, what if I wrote this? If I right click on that word, it gives me a better idea of how I might spell it. And that's one way you can work on your spelling, okay? So you're gonna type up your whole paragraph here, and then you will click review and submit. And then you are done.